Welcome to the final video in my series, Biggest Movie Summer Ever. I have been going through certain summer movie seasons of years past and highlighting the most important, most successful, most influential films to come out during those periods of time in an effort to determine which, if not this summer, was the biggest movie summer ever. Before I get started, I'd like to, first of all, talk a little bit about this past summer, 2018, which prompted this whole thing to get started with. A few of the highlights. Avengers Infinity War, technically not a summer film because it came out in the last weekend of April, but come on, who are we kidding? It's definitely a summer film. The sixth movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe to make $1 billion and the first to make $2 billion. This has been an incredibly successful franchise, as you are no doubt aware, and it's a darn good movie too. Jurassic World 2, also very successful, not as well liked, at least not by me. Pretty decent first half, pretty bad second half. Incredibles 2, big hit for Pixar. Deadpool 2 made a huge bank. Ant-Man and the Wasp, also very successful. Last I checked, it was about $6 million ahead of Mission Impossible Fallout, but since Mission Impossible is much more recent, it's still going pretty strong, and so it's probably going to exceed that very soon. Also, we had Ocean's 8 with Sandra Bullock and Cate Blanchett and Anne Hathaway and a bunch of other good people. Hereditary, cult horror movie, very, very creepy. The First Purge, a prequel to the Purge movies. Sorry to Bother You, a very surreal kind of cult comedy. Well, one of the other big family hits of the summer, Hotel Transylvania 3. Eighth Grade, another independent drama, quite good. The Meg with Jason Statham. Crazy Rich Asians, which just came out a couple weeks ago and has been #1 at the box office, surprising pretty much everybody by how successful it's been. Also noteworthy for the very small drop-off in its revenue in its second weekend. Normally there's a 20-30% drop-off, for films in their second weekend, but that's not the case with this one. And of course the very highly acclaimed Spike Lee drama Black Klansman, which is quite good and may get a Best Picture nomination. That would be really nice. I thought it was really good. Couple of noteworthy disappointments from this past summer. We recently had the release of Happy Time Murders with Melissa McCarthy and a bunch of puppets. Didn't make very much money. It's from what I read, it's like one of the lower grossing opening weekends for a Melissa McCarthy comedy. But the biggest disappointment is probably Solo: A Star Wars Story, at least as far as its revenue goes. I enjoyed the movie, but it was incredibly expensive because of all the reshoots, the change in director, the change in probably some cast as well. And it didn't really live up to any kind of expectations that are typical for a Star Wars movie. The Last Jedi, though not as well liked, still made big bank. Rogue One made huge bank, so did, of course, The Force Awakens. Solo, not really in their league, unfortunately, so that was kind of a bummer, I guess, for Lucasfilm. And that was, in a nutshell, 2018. Now, before I get into a quick summary of how I'm going to determine which is the biggest movie summer ever, I'd like to mention a couple of people. I don't do shout-outs that often, so I want to take this opportunity to do that. First of all, Gray 1951, Michael, as a lot of you know, is the person who has commented most frequently on my videos, so thank you very much, Michael. I appreciate your interest. He's given me a lot of feedback on the films that he's seen and not seen and liked, so thanks very much, Michael, for being so diligent in your reviewing of my videos. Appreciate it very much. Also, Claire. Claire is somebody who has had a couple different channels over the years. She's back with a new channel. Doesn't post often because she's got a couple of kids that she takes care of, but it's always great to see her. Then, of course, there's Luke Ryan. Luke Ryan, whose channel Razor Wire Reviews just got 4,000 subscribers. Just hit that mark recently, which is fantastic. Luke Ryan, of course, is most well known for his series, The Road to Episode Blank in the Star Wars saga, and also his 24-hour movie marathons and a lot of other series that he does, the Epic Film Challenge. So congratulations to him, and if you haven't checked him out, please do. Also, I'd like to mention a couple other guys named Ian and James. Their channels are called All Things Film, and DVD Collector 1974. Typically they do a lot of sort of weekly film discussions, and Michael's a part of that oftentimes. And of course I like to mention Ryan Chataway, and finally Jim Gisriel. If you're looking for someone on YouTube who regularly reviews new releases, new things that have just come out in theaters, and do it in an insightful, knowledgeable way, Jim is your man. And the links to all those guys' channels are in the description below if you'd like to check them out. I encourage you to do so. So, how am I going to determine which is the biggest movie summer ever? Well, here's what I actually opened up that question on Facebook, and only got one response, and the response was 1984 was the best. Thanks very much, Jack. But I was sort of trying to figure out what criteria I should use, and so what I decided was to take each one of the summers that I've highlighted in each one of the videos that I've done, and pick four movies to kind of represent that particular summer movie season, and then compare them that way to sort of determine which was the most successful, the most influential, the most admired, you know, just in terms of the overall impact of those particular four movies that I felt best represents the summer, and then determined which one is the biggest from there. Naturally, my own bias is a factor here, as well as, you know, the things that I've read about them and the revenue that that's been reported on them. But yeah, it's also somewhat influenced by my own bias, which means, of course, that my choice will be reported in magazines and newspapers and news sites all over the world. So let's get started, shall we? First of all, I just want to mention 1977. There was one very noteworthy release, which I'm sure you're aware of. It's called Star Wars. It sort of solidified the summer movie season. Jaws, of course, came out a couple of years earlier. There was also a huge success, but Star Wars was the megaton bomb that sort of said summer movies are big and they're bad and they're incredible and spectacular, and so it's kind of the success and the cultural impact that they all aspire to. I also want to talk a little bit about 1982. I didn't cover that in a specific video, but looking over its releases, there was a lot of really interesting stuff. First of all, the highest grossing movie of the 80s, E.T. the Extraterrestrial from Steven Spielberg, came out in 82. Also, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Conan the Barbarian with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Poltergeist, the teen comedy Fast Times at Ridgemont High, the very highly acclaimed drama Officer and a Gentleman, were some of the big successes from that summer, and a couple movies that didn't do quite as well box office-wise, but are very widely admired and influential. John Carpenter's The Thing, Tron, and of course Blade Runner. Blade Runner, an incredibly influential movie. So of those releases, I decided that the four that I would pick to represent 1982 would be E.T., Blade Runner, Conan the Barbarian, and Fast Times at Ridgemont High. For 1984, Ghostbusters, Gremlins, 16 Candles, and The Karate Kid. For 87, Lethal Weapon, Predator, RoboCop, Dirty Dancing. For 89, Batman, Dead Poets Society, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and Lethal Weapon 2. For 1993, Jurassic Park, The Fugitive, Sleepless in Seattle, and the family cult favorite Hocus Pocus. 94, The Lion King, Forrest Gump, Speed, and the Jim Carrey comedy The Mask. 96, Independence Day, The Rock, Mission Impossible 1, and The Nutty Professor with Eddie Murphy. 1999, Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, The Sixth Sense, The Blair Witch Project, and American Pie. 2002, Spider-Man, the first one with Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire, and Kirsten Dunst. Matt Damon in The Bourne Identity, Tom Cruise in the Steven Spielberg movie Minority Report, and the M. Night Shyamalan film with Mel Gibson, Signs. 2005, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, Batman Begins, The 40-Year-Old Virgin, and Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. 2008, The Dark Knight, Iron Man, WALL-E from Pixar, and Kung Fu Panda. 2011, Fast 5, Bridesmaids, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. The climax, of course, of what was at that time the biggest movie franchise in history. But that didn't last long. 2012, The Avengers, The Dark Knight Rises, Magic Mike, and Ted. And finally, 2018, Avengers Infinity War, Incredibles 2, Mission Impossible Fallout, and Spike Lee's Black Klansman. So those were the four movies I picked for each of the years that I focused on, and then I had to make the decision which one was the best. I was leaning, of course, towards 1993 with its double blockbuster punch of Jurassic Park and The Fugitive, which won a Best Picture nomination, along with Sleepless in Seattle, which was, you know, a very, very, very well-regarded romantic comedy. And of course, The Dark Knight and Iron Man both came out in the summer of 2008. The Dark Knight being probably the most acclaimed comic book movie yet made, and Iron Man being the launching pad for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which is currently the most successful movie franchise in history. But those are only two particular movies for those years. Well, three, actually, and I was looking for four, which summer had all four being incredibly influential. And so I decided that my choice for the biggest summer movie ever would be 1999. I'm sorry, did I say that wrong again? It's the biggest movie summer ever. I always get that mixed up. 1999. 1999, you had The Sixth Sense, which was an incredibly high-grossing movie, widely admired, multiple Oscar nominations, incredibly influential and talked about, and, Best Picture nominee. Did I mention that? Yeah, lots of nominations, lots of high-grossing. Yeah, everyone was talking about that movie. You had The Blair Witch Project, which pretty much jump-started the whole genre of found-footage horror movies. You had American Pie, which follows in the footsteps of Animal House, Fast Times at Ridgemont High, as the sort of teen sex comedy as far as, like, the ones that they're all compared to. And then there's Episode 1. And I know what you're thinking, Scott, Episode 1 is not like one of the most admired films to come out during a summer movie season. It's not even the most admired prequel from the Star Wars franchise. Well, hear me out here. Episode 1 set a new standard for the way that special effects, which are so crucial to so many summer blockbusters, are integrated into the movie. You had not only the CGI characters and the ships, but also the environments. They had been used no more extensively. They were never used as extensively in any movie before Episode 1, with the possible exception of, like, Tron, but still there's tons of just regular live-action scenes in Tron. And also, not only that, but, an incredible, huge blockbuster that everyone went to see and everyone had an opinion about. But most importantly is probably the reason why we continue to have Star Wars be such a huge part of movie going right now. Because there were no Star Wars movies for like 15 years, over 15 years. And finally, George Lucas decided, once he'd seen Jurassic Park, that it was time to make a new Star Wars movie because the technology got to the point where he felt that he could make the kind of movie that he wanted to make. And thus, we had the rebirth of the Star Wars franchise, which has been, the most influential of any movie franchise ever, and the most anticipated movie probably ever made. Can't think of any movie that was more eagerly waited for than Episode 1. And Episode 1 has its defenders, and a lot of people, of course, don't like certain aspects of it, or the whole thing, or whatever. But there's no question that the movie was a huge success financially, and that it was, an event. It was an absolute monumental event. So, although I strongly lean toward 93 with Jurassic Park and The Fugitive, or 2008 with those two very big comic book movies, I think that the strongest overall roster of summer movies came in 1999 as far as just the incredible success. I can't go strictly by box office because naturally movies that have come out more recently make more money because ticket prices are higher. If you went by, if you canceled out inflation, then Gone with the Wind would still be the highest grossing movie of all time because of the sheer volume of tickets that were sold. So I couldn't go by box office alone. So, 1999, yes, that is what, in my opinion, is the biggest movie summer of all time, 1999. I hope you've enjoyed this little series of mine. I have. I don't know what I'm next going to be doing on YouTube, but I do know that the 10-year anniversary of my first YouTube video is coming up pretty soon. Before the end of the year. That was when I first started posting videos, was sometime in 2008. So that 10-year anniversary is coming up, and I might do something special for that, but I don't know what it is. I'm sure you might disagree with my choice. If you do, leave me a comment, let me know. And also visit my Facebook page. That would be nice, in addition to all those other channels that I recommended. And of course, if you'd like to see the other videos in this series, the link to that playlist is below in the video description, along with all those other links that I included. I appreciate very much your interest. I'm glad that you've enjoyed this if you had. And I'll see you again real soon. Take it easy.